Hi, I'm James Graham, CEO of Recce Pharmaceuticals, ASX RCE. Thank you for joining us today, where we focus upon our Q4 FY26 highlights and investor presentation. So who is Recce Pharmaceuticals? Recce Pharmaceuticals is a leading Australian anti-infective company which is approaching near-term commercialisation milestones focused upon the unmet medical need of diabetic foot ulcer infections. We in fact have two phase 3 candidates, one in Indonesia, which approved in Indonesia, as we're on track for later this calendar year, would be approvable across the ASEAN group of countries, the Middle East and beyond. In Australia, of course, we have a phase 3 study focused upon the US FDA, and that study has broadened and expanded in its clinical setting, and it's a very exciting opportunity to see the US FDA engage with that and in fact bring our timelines forwards. As we look to the commerciality of this candidate, we're very pleased to see one of the highest diabetes prevalence regions, which is the Middle East, step forward with one of the leading Middle Eastern pharmaceutical companies providing a term sheet for a 10-year exclusive multi-country license. That's a fantastic validation of this technology and indicating a 30 to 36% net royalty, and of course, upon a major patient population. We continue to advance multiple candidates through their respective clinical and preclinical programs, and particularly when we look towards the US Department of Defense, where we have three US Army or US Department of War programs, and they are certainly advancing through their natural stages. As we look to our markets, when we think of a topical application, the highest price premium you can have is focused upon diabetic foot ulcer infections. It's a market of around 5.8 billion US dollars. And of course, when you break into the regions of countries, you see diabetes running really in an uncontrolled fashion. Over 20 million have diabetes in Indonesia, over 84 million in the MENA group of countries, MENA being the Middle Eastern group, that we have that term sheet advancing to a definitive agreement. And what it really represents is 1 in every 3 adults who have diabetes will get a diabetic foot ulcer. And I can tell you, around 80% of those ulcers become infected. There is no standard of care specifically for the treatment of diabetic foot ulcer infections. We are positioned as it. We work broader than any other antibiotic known to date. We work faster than any other antibiotic known to date. And that means we have capability to serve this unmet medical need. And of course, when you look to the cases of hospitalizations and amputation, it is a very significant need at that. So some of the key highlights in just the last quarter alone, it's been a busy time and I expect that to continue ahead. You'll see on a clinical basis and of course a regulatory and a commercial basis, major advances. So in Australia, our DFI, standing for Diabetic Foot Ulcer Infection Study, is in its pivotal phase 3 status. It's a registrational study. It's a study that the US FDA are expected to accept that clinical data from. For those who don't know, in fact, there's more phase 1 clinical data submitted to the US FDA than from Australia than there is from any other country around the world. So they're well versed to Australian sites. What we've really done is we've gone from just the mild infection status, which is say 30% of the market, to include the mild and moderate infection status, which is now 80% of the market. And we're positioned, of course, to treat upfront, treat with confidence and treat liberally, knowing that it will work on any type of bacteria that is present and it will stop that bacteria in its tracks. For what it's worth on a pharmaceutical basis, when we look to the commercialization, we're actually very complementary to existing therapies because when a patient has an infected ulcer, and we've got many examples of that, you can't graft that infected ulcer, you can't suture that ulcer closed, you can't sell regenerative medicine if that ulcer is infected. So we're really a sales enabler as we're increasingly discovering with our commercial partners. So on that basis, we have a non-binding but very indicative term sheet with a leading Middle Eastern pharmaceutical company. The proposed agreement is a 10-year agreement. I think it's around 11 countries. And it's of a 30 to 36% net royalty on a proposed sales price of around 1,500 US dollars. That's a very, very attractive agreement, and we look forward to progressing that to a definitive agreement, which we're very active with right now. Looking back, of course, to Indonesia. So we've got one phase 3 in Australia and we've got another phase 3 in Indonesia. Why? Australia is focused upon the US FDA. Indonesia is approvable across the ASEAN and the Middle East. And the Indonesian Regulatory Authority, BPOM, which is the Indonesian FDA, completed a comprehensive inspection of multiple sites, the clinical sites that our study is taking place in, and of course, all the audit and process they go through there. There was no significant findings, no required changes, and in fact, it was a wonderful green light to proceed and in fact expand as we have now done. So our global expansion is really focused again initially on this topical application. I mentioned, of course, the highest price premium is diabetic foot ulcer infections. As we know, in certain regions, there may be off-label use. You might use it for a acute bacterial skin and skin structure infection. You may use it for a burn infection, any infection, it doesn't matter, but they're paying a price premium when they utilize that. And that is why we are positioned in that instance. So that commercialization across the region continues. This is where we'll pass across to my colleague, Dr. Alan Dunton, our Chief Medical Advisor and fellow board member. Thank you, Alan.